Circling back a little bit, just as a reminder, we may be using the I'm using the terminology sometimes coach and player, but it doesn't have to be coach. They could be a lay person at the church. They could be a parent. They could be a simple teacher. Anybody who's overseeing something, whatever title they have. What does it look like in their leadership of others? So in competing biblically, there's an element where who's competing. We talked about that. The inner circle is players, so we're discussing them. Coaches, right? They're in the inner circle. Support personnel, trainers and managers. Outer circle, family, friends, fans. All these people, spectators, they all have a role to play in this deal. As we talk about program flipping, or what that looks like, the spectators have a more, and the family and friends as the outer circle have a more passive response in this process. They do have impact, as we've said, though. Because if you get resistance from the outer circle, just normal parents or anybody, somebody who's even observing things, it's fair for them to be aware. It's not true maybe at the professional or the larger sport levels, because what a fan thinks or whatever, it is a factor, because with social media, it's enough to discourage people. There's news right now this week about a college quarterback who's seeing himself get death threats. He's on a top 10 team in the country, but because they haven't won every game, he gets death threats. So when he goes on social media, so you can see the ramifications here are both positive and negative. And in this situation, the outer circle, who isn't even part of the contest, that just show up on a Saturday or Thursday night or a Sunday, they have impact on the lives of these people, whether they're 30 or 20 or 10. And so even as we talk about it through certain filters, it's important that there be appreciation that even the outer circle impacts the inner circle, simply not as directly and aggressively, but it does have impact. It either can produce resistance or it can enhance the movement of whatever the goal is. And we need to both pray about that and act about that. We're talking about our observation of what it takes to have a program that wasn't in the direction of this philosophy go in the direction of this philosophy. So, further point on this, regarding the influence in the inner circle, your success is linked with four things that we call 4 parts of the buy-in. 4 parts of moving the ball forward. There's a buy-in, there's a warning, there's a rub, and there's a cost. And let me explain those real briefly. The buy-in is what we've been speaking about, is getting people on the same page in your community. When I teach a class unrelated to sports, I need them to buy in. If they don't buy in, it's not going to enhance the experience for that person. But as we know in a classroom, if somebody's disruptive or disinterested, there's a sense of that. You can tell when people care and don't care. So even in an educational setting, in anything, the buy-in has impact depending on what the situation is. There has to be a buy-in by the people who are involved as the decision makers or the leaders, whatever you want to call it. And then it helps to have a buy-in of those people that they're serving. But it's most critical that there be a buy-in of the leadership. It increases the chance that there'll be a buy-in of those that they're serving. Second is the warning. And this is a huge, huge deal. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. So the buy-in is compromised by the warning. If somebody or somebodies don't buy in, then that resistance, whether it's passive or aggressive, diminishes the chance of that program gaining traction because it's getting resistance that it heads in a direction. It's no different if you look in a spiritual sense. If you're in a local church, if folks go there that don't participate and the leaders are presenting a vision and a mission and the people don't volunteer or engage, it doesn't end up with traction. If they grumble and complain in the background, it compromises stuff. There's diminished spiritual power, and practically it's going to disengage the process. One person, we've talked about this in Israel, Achan, when 2 million Israelites were coming into the promised land, one person, when they crossed the river, compromised 2 million people's opportunity in the battle they faced that day against Ai, as an example. And that's an example of the warning. The rub is this. The buy-in is critical. The warning is a little leaven leavens the lump. And the rub is this. Selfishness is going to disable the process. Selfishness will disable the process. Selflessness will enhance the process. We didn't say no self because we're human beings. We just want less of self. Less of self. More we than me is what we're looking for. And the rub when you're trying to get a buy-in is that the warning is somebody may go sideways because it rubs them wrong. That makes sense? That's why we call it the rub. It rubs them wrong, and they don't buy in, and then they passively or aggressively respond, and that's what you fear God about. And the fourth critical factor in this is the cost. The cost is death of self. The cost is the target is that coaches die to themselves for the players, and the target for the players is they die to themselves for the coaches. And the target in this ideal hypothetical world is that the spectators in the outer circle is supportive. In a sense, they die to their vision of what the team should look like and how it should play. And they say, we're going to be loyal regardless of what we see and feel and think. Now, that's flagrantly unrealistic. But if you're talking about a corporate experience, the response of the outer circle, even if they're simply spectators, you've been to games when people boo. That'd be an example of a rub. The fans didn't like what they see, and they reject because they're not willing to bless the teams who are playing because they don't like that they're not playing the way they want or not playing well. And if you've been to a game where there's a lot of booing on and you were for the team, where there's booing, you know how that doesn't enhance your experience because it's discouraging for people to voice their disapproval or whatever. And so we always want to think about the importance of the buy-in. We need to fear God, which is the warning. Fear God about the rub of the selfishness and understand there is a cost to play. It's going to cost everybody. And it starts from the top down, which is the leader, whether it's the head pastor or the leadership or the coach or the parents. We see that all the time. I was talking with a parent last night, and I asked how things are going with their children. And the response told me that the warning was in place, that there was a little bit of leaven in the house, that the rub was the kids didn't like parenting was going on, and they didn't buy in, nor did they understand the cost, that they're there to honor and obey their parents, and the family experience is compromised. And those kids, whether they're 5 or 15, have an opportunity to be biblical about how they approach the family, but they weren't in a voluntary organization. They were joined a family that they didn't choose at some level, and that's why families are a fear God kind of thing. But when you're in voluntary organizations, which is what much of sports is, then you have these options of how to act and respond. Now, here's the facts. If you come to a school, you don't get to pick the coaches. You don't get to pick the leadership, but you can make a decision whether you want to participate or not. And our point is, biblically, if you do choose to participate, you have a biblical responsibility to submit their authority and have an attitude of not my will, but yours be done. And that's incredibly difficult because of the warning and the rub and the cost, both to those who participate and to their parents and family. And fans also, frankly.